Hello, everyone. What we've got on our docket today is there has been a new ban list update for EDH that we will touch on for most of the episode. But before that, I wanted to talk about this little thing I call the Multani Problem. And it starts with this deck I created almost on accident a couple years ago. What are your initial thoughts about what were your initial thoughts when I first played with this deck, Prince?
Yeah, Multani. It's been a while. It's been a hot minute. By the way, welcome back, everyone. It's good to be back after a short little break. Um, Multani was one of those decks that when Sakaven built it, it didn't really play like a traditional deck. It played almost like a storm deck in the same way as where when the game ends, it didn't actually matter what creatures were played, who got attacked, who was blocking, what life total everyone was at. It just kind of suddenly went off, went on for a long time, and then killed everyone with this huge spell after making a ton of mana. And that was, first of all, really unexpected for a green deck. And it just attacked the local format we had at the time in a really weird way that no one was prepared to deal with, and it created this problem of the answers we had for each other suddenly not really applying to this strategy. So it was really a unique experience, at least to me, figuring out, first of all, how this deck even worked in the first place, and secondly, how to stop it at the same time as stopping other strategies, if that was even the efficient option to begin with.
Yeah, how I began with this deck was I got we got to the point where like for several weeks in a row there weren't really um, cEDH minded players around to play with, and I wanted to figure out how to play normal EDH at a different game store. And so I saw Multani, and like I'm a sort of a lands guy. It's like what I do. Played Titan Shift and Modern for a long time. So I saw Multani and I was like, well, that's kind of cool. He gets big with lands, and people don't really interact with lands in EDH very much. And like I can return to my hand instead of putting him in the command zone, so that's nice. I was like, okay, what if I just stick him in there with like all my green land ramp spells that I own? And when I did that, I'm not sure why, but somehow Sasaya Orochi Ascendant ended up in the deck. I think it's because I saw Multani's ability to return two lands you control to their owner's hand, and then I saw Sasaya. Her cost is to have reveal your hand, and if you have seven or more lands in your hand, you flip her. On the flip side, Sasaya reads whenever a land you control is tapped for mana, add one mana of that type to your mana pool for each other land you control with the same name. So essentially, what that means is that you can tap a forest and it adds mana equal to the total number of forests you control. And I think the first time I realized what this deck was about to become was when I flipped Sasaya and I cast a ramp spell like Nature's Lore. Cost two, got a forest and put it into play untapped. At the time, like it was just mixed in with my other ramp spells, but I noticed that this it's like a really insane ritual when Sasaya's flipped. And I guess the stars aligned because in my head I saw, oh, so my ramp spells, which get me to my big stuff like my commander, when I flip Sasaya, become rituals, and let me make mana over and over. So I already had some cards that drew cards equal to a creature's power, like Rishkar's Expertise is the biggest one. And I saw a potential for a coherent strategy. Like in my design philosophy, I like to have a big overall goal for a deck, like an engine that functions, and it's kind of cyclical where everything has one function but then has another function later in the game, so that you can put more value into each of your cards. And so the ramp spells became rituals. The draw spells became like combo pieces to let you continue to storm off. And Multani was the crux of everything. He was big. He could draw cards equal to his power. Make after you have a bunch of lands in play. He comes back, so he lets you recur your. It lets you keep casting the spells that sacrifice a creature to draw cards, and he returns lands to your hand when he's in the graveyard to flip Sasaya, to help flip Sasaya. So that all sort of came together, and I put the first draft of the deck together, and then I started playing with it with our local play group, and I wasn't losing at all for some reason.
Yeah. I like the way you described Sasaya there of how it made every card in the deck that used to have one purpose suddenly has a different purpose from the before and after Sasaya gets flipped. That's really cool. It's actually a really beautiful thing. It's kind of like the changing of the seasons where like everything gets recycled and is born anew. And Sasaya is really the heart and soul of this deck, as I remember, because it was just some goofy thing that you had teched in to this Multani deck that I thought was just gonna get slotted out. But it really transformed it into the Storm deck that I don't think it was ever really meant to be, per se, because
Yeah, definitely
Sasaya
not.
allowed you to basically just go on and on and on making mana, and you just never had to stop these loops. And it was just the weirdest thing I had ever seen.
Yeah, one of the craziest things I figured out was like, and then there's a couple spells that untap all my lands. Was there's Root Awakening and there's Early Harvest, and
Yeah.
those are insane rituals. They're so good that I could cast a Root Awakening for 5, that nets me a bunch of mana. Cast Eternal Witness to get it back, nets me even more mana, and like I could just keep casting Multani and drawing more cards, and the deck can even support something like the Great Aurora. Now, this is one of my favorite spells of all time. Not sure if you've read it. Many people have not. And many people don't get through the card without deciding to stop reading it. But it's a 9-mana green
You
sorcery.
cast it against me like 4 times, resolved it, and I still haven't read that card.
Yeah. Although Prince is famous for reading only the relevant parts of each Magic card. But to me,
Yeah, I
everything
basically just do what he tells me when that card resolves.
to
I believe
me
him.
to me everything is relevant. 9-mana sorcery. Each player shuffles all cards from his or her hand and all permanents he or she owns into his or her library, then draws that many cards. Each player may put any number of land cards from his or her hand onto the battlefield. Exile the Great Aurora. So, I have all my floating mana, all my lands in play, all my permanents, my enchantments, everything. Just cast the Great Aurora. Say I have like 50 mana left over, and a lot of cards in hand. The way to break this card is hand size. So, say I shuffle in 60 cards, and my opponent shuffles in there like 15. I draw 60 cards. I put as many lands as I like onto the battlefield. If I redraw Society, I can just like, I put a couple lands into play, keep 7 in my hand, immediately flipper, and like the crazy thing about this card is that it's still your main phase after it resolves, and all the lands are untapped. It's a card that looks like it costs 9 mana, but it doesn't really cost 9 mana. In fact, most of the times I cast it, it costs less than 0 mana. Because it immediately makes back its own cost by giving me more lands untapped.
Let me ask a little question here, so that the audience doesn't potentially get lost here. You casually said, if you have 60 cards in hand, can I ask what your deck is doing with 60 cards in hand and how we got here?
Okay, so remember when we flipped Sasaya and our ramp spells became rituals?
Right.
Say I have a couple of those in my hand and a card like Life's Legacy. And say I have 8. 8's the typical power of Multani the first time I start to go off. So I cast like 2 ramp spells. They get me 2 more lands, so I'm at 10. Multani's power is 10. And then
Right.
I net. If Multani's power is 10, say I have like 7 forests in play, I tap one of the forests I had for 5. I could cast and explore for 2, draw a card, put a forest into play. Now my forest tap for 6. I tap that forest for 6, cast like a Nature's Lore, go get another forest, put it in play. Now my forest tap for 7. Tap the rest of my forests. Actually, I don't need to tap the rest of my forests. Just use my floating mana, cast Life's Legacy. Sack Multani. I would draw like 10 cards. Draw 10 cards with after casting Life's Legacy. So now I have 10 more cards in hand, even more mana. And because these effects are redundant, let me list off the amount of cards that draw cards equal to a creature's power you can play in here. So we've got Garruk Primal Hunter.
I was about to ask about that.
Yeah, Garruk Primal Hunter, 5 mana. His -3, which kills him, but that's okay. Draws cards equal to the greatest power among creatures you control. That's 1. Next, you have Grothma, All Devouring. This one's a little different. 5 mana, 10/8 creature. It says other creatures have, whenever this creature attacks, you may have it fight Grothma, All Devouring. When Grothma leaves the battlefield, each player draws cards equal to the amount of damage dealt to Grothma this turn by sources they controlled. Essentially what this means is I can play Grothma pre-combat, attack with Multani, have Multani fight Grothma, and if Multani is at least as big as Grothma, I will draw a bunch of cards. So that's 2. Then there's Life's Legacy, 3. That's simple. That's the most efficient, most powerful version of this effect. 2 mana, sack a creature, draw cards equal to the creature's power. And then there is Soul's Majesty. That's number 4. Draws cards equal to the power of a creature you control. Rishkar's Expertise. That's the most powerful version. That's number 5. You draw those cards and then you can cast the spell for free with CMC 5 or less. Then there is Momentous Fall. That's number 6. It's a 4-mana instant. Sacks a creature, draw cards, and gain life. Then there's Return of the Wild Speaker, number 7. Instant. Draw cards equal to the greatest power among non-human creatures you control. Multani is an elemental avatar, so that works. And then number 8 is Greater Good. The repeatable effect, 4-mana enchantment. Sack a creature, draw cards equal to a creature's power, then discard 3 cards. So because these effects are so redundant, and each of them draws upwards of 10 cards, if I'm operating this properly, I won't be running out of cards. So that's why I presume that whenever I would cast the Great Aurora, I will have a bunch of cards in hand. In the double digits, at least. Oh, I forgot. There's a 9th one. Hunter's Insight. It's kind of like Grothma. 3 mana instant. Choose target creature you control. Whenever that creature deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker this turn, draw that many cards. And Multani has natural trample too. So. Yeah. So I get a bunch of mana, cast a big spell like the Great Aurora. That is sometimes completely unnecessary. Let me explain how this deck wins after it storms off in that fashion, casting those ramp spells, which are rituals, and drawing the deck. Tutors are very valuable because tutors can find Eternal Witness to keep going with the loop. And then once I have an Eternal Witness available and a Primal Command in my hand, I can cast Primal Command, either shuffle the Eternal Witness from my graveyard into my library, or just keep it in my hand, and then search for Eternal Witness. And then I can play Eternal Witness and get Primal Command back, and then I can sacrifice Eternal Witness to Greater Good or one of the other effects. And I've presented a loop, but it's card and mana intensive, which means it's not deterministic. There's nothing infinite in this deck. But the goal is to keep going through that loop until I hit Hurricane. Hurricane is the win the game spell in this deck. It's a innocuous little green sorcery from Alpha. First set. It's one green and X. It's a sorcery. Hurricane deals X damage to each player and each creature with flying. So I can pay a bunch of mana into it and deal X damage to each player, which would kill all of us. But there's plenty of ways to break that symmetry in green. The most easy way in this deck is Glacial Chasm. Glacial Chasm reads cumulative upkeep, pay 2 life. When Glacial Chasm enters the battlefield, sacrifice it. Sacrifice it unless you sacrifice a land. Creatures you control can't attack, and all damage that would be dealt to you is reduced to 0. Or prevent all damage that would be dealt to you, I think is what it reads. And so you put that into play with one of the extra land drop effects, of which there are many. There's Explore, Summer Bloom, Broken Bond, Restore, Scape Shift. So or Crop Rotation. You put it into play with one of those, and then you cast Hurricane. And that all functions in a really tight package, even for a singleton commander deck. And the reason that it's so tight is because there are 38 lands in this deck. And maybe that's not a high quantity for the typical lands deck in Casual Commander. Right. But it's certainly unheard of for cEDH.
In cEDH, that's like 10 lands too many.
Unless it's Tatyova. I think Tatyova has 37. But
oh, yeah. Tatyova has a lot. I actually assumed she had even a little bit more than that. But anyway, you win the game after you have a ton of mana. And you start the game by ramping up to Multani, who you will later use to draw cards. The thing I remember most about this deck is how difficult it was to interact with. I have memories of trying to stop it early by like killing Multani or something. And I have memories of trying to stop it late by, countering a spell or trying to exile something from a graveyard or Pithing Needle naming Sasaya or any number of things. And I remember most of these things just not working. So that speaks a lot to the deck's resiliency, but I don't exactly remember the exact reasons of why this deck was so hard to disrupt. Can you talk a little bit about why it doesn't just fold to a simple counterspell or removal spell?
It's because it has more built-in redundancy than pretty much any deck out there. It has 9 spells that draw cards equal to Multani's power. Multani himself has a built-in recursion ability that gets around commander text and forwards my game plan at the same time. Sasaya is a creature with a flip cost that can be paid as many times as you like at instant speed. Because revealing your hand is not something that costs anything. You can't... If you play Sasaya and she resolves, that's it.
That's true. So you cast Sasaya and you try to activate her ability, and I target her with Swords to Plowshares. This does nothing?
It does absolutely nothing because I could just activate the ability again in response.
And then once she flips, is she considered a different... Oh, she's not a creature, is she?
No, just a legendary enchantment.
Huh.
Once I flip her and take and cast another spell, you can get her with Crossing Grip. But like...
Yeah, I guess so, huh?
Okay. I can flip my mana. And that's a lot of mana. If I flip her with 3 untapped lands and say I have 5 total lands in play, that's very conservative. That's still 15 mana.
So even if... okay, hold on. I need to answer something before I go into more hypotheticals. What if you target her with something that can also hit enchantments, like an Assassin's Trophy?
It'll still resolve because it doesn't matter which of the permanents it was when you targeted it. It just matters if it's still a legal target when the spell attempts to resolve.
Right, I thought so. But what happens is I can target her with Assassin's Trophy. You respond by activating her again, flipping her, and then you can float mana before that trophy even resolves?
Yeah, because you can activate mana abilities at any time. They don't use the stack, just... as soon as she flips, her ability is static ability, and the next time state-based effects are checked, you can just float mana.
Yeah, it sounds like removal's not where you want to be when the Multani deck gets to this stage. But what about counter spells? If you fight Society on the stack and she gets countered, that should stop you, right?
Yeah, it should stop me unless I have a Regrowth or an Eternal Witness ready. But the thing is, you have to first know that you need to counter Sasaya in order to stop her.
Right. And nobody knows what Sasaya is.
Yeah, it's always a treat to play this card.
I
And
read a poll that shows that 77% of Americans believe that Sasaya Orochi Ascendant does not actually exist.
another one of your famous theories.
They don't know it. It's like you cast it, they're like, I don't see it. I don't know this card. I've never read about this card. I've never seen this card in any list. It's fake news. And
But
then it
beyond
resolves.
the beyond the comedy, it is in mono green, so there's plenty of ways to get around counter spells. We got Allosaurus Shepherd. 1 mana. Green spells can't be countered. That's the whole deck. That is the whole deck. And then we've got Ob's Veil and Veil of Summer. Both great responses for her trying to be countered. And then ways to put her in instant speed. Chord of Calling. Emergent Zone. I can win at instant speed via Emergent Zone. Which
That's
is
really
a
fun.
lot
You did
more
that once or
powerful
twice.
in this deck because I have land tutors. And so, like, if you let me get a bunch of mana in play, I will eventually get to a point where I can win the game. And that eventually is a shorter eventually than the typical EDH deck. Now, this is applying to casual EDH, but this is where we were like testing this out. The best way to interact with this deck, and the one that you've succeeded with, is immediately removing Multani every time he enters the battlefield.
Which not every deck can afford to do. I will note.
Yeah.
Like, they say don't forget to add removal to your deck, but they don't say don't forget to add enough removal to take down the same creature every single turn, every single time it comes back around to you.
Which it kind of is every single turn with this card.
Yeah, I guess so.
I remember sometimes I got squashed because I was the arch enemy from turn 0. Which is the beginning of what I want to talk about. The Multani Problem. I built this deck. I designed this deck, and it would not lose. If there are 8 players in the game, it still won. Because what it was doing was so out of left field, so different, goes outside of what people expect. But it's also really, it's hard to disrupt and hard to put away. You can disrupt it, but it only delays it for a little bit. It doesn't stop it
Yeah.
completely.
And at this point, you and I had already started making that transition toward the most competitive side of Commander. So I remember not personally being all that upset that I kept losing to Multani casual pots, because I know I have seen the end game for this format, right? I've seen those Thrasios and Timna, Hermit Druid lists that kill really quickly. So like this was like, yeah, it's good. But it's not the fact that it keeps winning that's just that I find disturbing. It was just it seemed to be stuck in this place where the play group that we had at this specific store, the one that's closest in by distance to get to, they just could not handle this deck no matter what they threw at it. And of course, this is still casual Commander.
Yeah.
But it was also at the point where you couldn't quite make it any better, and taking it to cEDH pods, like true cEDH, even though it did win every once in a while, it didn't feel. It felt like the odd man out usually in pods. It felt low on interaction and a little low on speed as well.
Yeah, but marginally so. I still felt like I was in it, but I was the little brother every time at
For
C
sure.
in
I mean,
cEDH pods.
we took this deck to Grand Prix Vegas and even played with the spike feeders down there, and they found it really cool that you were about to win like the next turn cycle.
Yeah, this deck Goldfish is turn 4 and turn 5 very consistently. That's its range. That's its critical turn. Which
And see the
it sounds
sorry,
absurd
what?
looking at it.
Yeah, absolutely. And what really makes it clear to me that this isn't a traditional cEDH deck, nor is it a traditional casual deck, is that most cEDH decks that are just blitzingly fast, if you take those down to a casual pod and people know to try and stop you, you could eat like a counter spell and then slow down and then eventually not be able to win because everyone is so weary of you. This deck, even though it's slower and can be seen as not quite good enough for the format of cEDH, if casual players try and stop you with a counterspell or removal spells thrown your way, it usually does not work in the same way that it works against cEDH strategies.
Yeah, for sure.
Just be-
It's got a
because you
lot of.
attack with a yeah, yeah, it's what I'm trying to say is that you just attack with a mass of the same thing that you're trying to do, that redundancy that you were talking about. That's just so, I don't know, it feels untraditional. As I'm saying it, I'm questioning myself, but for some reason, the deck in the way that it performs against every stage of other commander decks that could be sitting across from you just feels different than any other cEDH deck I've played.
Yeah, I'm myself also like doing yet another double take, thinking about like what makes it special in that way. What makes it able to push through. Like it has won so many games in which I was the archenemy from turn 0. If the deck had a will, it just didn't care.
Yeah.
It would function regardless. I think maybe there's something to be said about deck building here, in that the fact that the way it's designed makes every card dual purpose, or nearly every card. Maybe that makes
Yeah.
it. Maybe that's pseudo card advantage. Maybe that's affording the deck more lines of play and winning combinations of cards than is theoretically possible with a normal set of tutors and spells.
Yeah, I've got actually two analogies that really paint the picture of why it was kind of hard to play against a that Multani list in a casual setting. The first is with a friend of mine that I had over with a bunch of other friends at my house once. He was on Atraxa Super Friends, a very popular archetype for those who had the money in Casual Commander. Um, anyway, one game he's off to a really good start. He's getting the chain veil. He's got a bunch of planeswalkers. He's threatening to lock down the game in multiple ways. And then we're faced with this dilemma of like, well, obviously we need to attack him. I don't want to kill him. I mean, we've all got other opponents. We don't want to just take this guy out of the game and then have the game last another hour, right? And I don't want to just delete everything he has on board and leave him with nothing, kind of like kick him to the bottom of the stairs, as I like to say, and just take him out of the game. But I'm also really scared of what he could do with even a limited amount of resources. So basically, by the time it comes back around to him, after we've all made a choice of how exactly to take him down a peg, we basically attacked two of his commanders down to lower loyalty, got rid of another one of them, and then he untaps and he locks us all out anyway, right? He wins the game because he had such a powerful presence that you either had to completely target him out of the game or you lost, and there wasn't an in between. And I have this same memory with a deck kind of like Mizzix, another storm deck similar to Multani, which is feels funny to say because Multani's mono green. But I had heard really good things about Mizzix, about how powerful of a commander he was, but I hadn't really played against him until maybe a year and a half after he was released. And we killed him. He got cast, he got countered. We were to the point where he cost 8 mana, he gets cast again, and I'm like, okay, yeah, no, I'm just gonna stop targeting this thing. I've got a really good board state. I'll win in another turn or two. And the guy untaps with his 8 mana Mizzix, and then just wins the game like easily by a landslide, not even close. It's these situations where it feels like you have to target a deck so hard that you feel bad doing it, or you're just gonna lose.
Yeah.
And I think that's the danger of these decks that are just so good, is that they create these really ugly games against casual decks that aren't built to handle storms type strategies where you're like, well, I don't want to bully this person, but I'm obviously going to die. I've been killed like 5 times in a row. So I don't know if there's a fun way for traditional casual decks to play against a deck like this, which is why we were trying to force it into the cEDH um, style of gameplay. If I remember correctly, it's because we felt like we were this deck was just overpowered. It wasn't built for casual play.
Yeah, I felt like that was an issue of identity and not just design. Like I don't think you could build a Multani deck that won via Ashaya that wasn't like this. And in my head I was like, well, I suppose I have to try and play it into cEDH and see what happens.
It works
Because
both ways too, because the list, is it not true that the list that was catered more to casual pods and the list that was uh built to handle the cEDH style of decks were really close to just being the exact same list?
yeah, they're only a few cards different. I think the differences boil down to Carpet of Flowers, Titania's Song, Mana Vault, Null Rod, Manglehorn, and Collector Roof. Those are the only cards that would be different.
That's kind of crazy.
Yeah,
I
and
mean,
of
I'm thinking of like one of my first cEDH decks was a Tasigur, and the difference between casual Tasigur and competitive Tasigur is like night and day. There are so many cards between the two lists that just do not work interchangeably in the same formats,
yeah,
and that's just not the case here. It's just like it's so tight because it does what it's trying to do, and that package can't be disrupted, otherwise it falls apart.
easily. Yeah, it has to have a critical mass of everything in the deck, beyond the few slots I devote to disruption. And a little note in Titania's Song, it's a card people might not have heard of. When I was looking for a way to maximize my artifact interaction in this mono green deck to attack the meta, um, I think I was doing that before Paradox Engine was banned. Um,
Oh
like when you were still on Paradox Scepter Thrasios.
gosh, I don't even remember. Like I remember that it happened, but I don't remember even having or using that card. It's been so long.
Yeah, Titania's Song is a 4 mana green enchantment. It says, "Let me pull up the Oracle text." It's one of those
Oh boy.
cards.
Not one of those cards. No.
It said each non-creature artifact loses all abilities and becomes an artifact creature with power and toughness each equal to its mana value. If Titania's Song leaves the battlefield, this effect continues until the end of turn. So, it it makes the mana crypt to 0/0. It dies. No abilities. Mana Vault and Soul Ring, those are just 1/1 creatures. 1/1 artifact creatures with no abilities. Null Rod. Even Null Rod. This is hilarious. If you put Titania's Song into play, Null Rod becomes a 2/2 artifact creature with no abilities. It loses
Wow.
its ability to take away abilities.
So you could say it does nothing.
Ah, yes.
I'll
But
be
yeah,
here all
just
night, ladies and gentlemen.
but yeah, the only changes I would make is Carpet of Flowers because cEDH is where you expect everybody to be playing islands. It's not
Yep.
necessarily the case in casual. Mana Crypt and Mana
Should be,
Vault
but it's
are
not.
yeah, Mana Crypt and Mana Vault. They're just power out my ramp spells faster when I'm facing against cEDH decks.
Yeah.
They're not as kosher in casual pods, especially because of their price tags. And then Titania's Song, Null Rod, Manglehorn, and Collector Roof are all there to deal with the mana rock Storming and Ad Naus, and now they're good against Dockside Extortionist too. But though,
Dockside just pumping out those 0/0s under Titania's song.
oh yeah, lots of dice triggers, I guess. But but yeah, this deck is just, it is what it is.
It sure is. That's a really good description of it.
A fun card as to use as a face card for it is Gaia's Touch. Another card that people probably haven't heard of. It's from the good old The Dark. It's a 2-mana green enchantment. It says you may play an additional land.
I just now remembered which one you were talking about.
Yeah. You may play an additional land on each of your turns, but that land has to be a basic forest. And at any time you can sacrifice Gaia's Touch and add 2 green to your mana pool. So that's pretty cool. It's like a 2-mana exploration, but well, it's like a 0-mana exploration in a mono green deck. So sleeper card, if anyone's playing mono green out there, this card is 100% better than exploration in most situations. Sure, you can't play it on turn 1, but are you really trying to play exploration on turn 1 in a casual game? So then again, I don't know how many mono green land decks there are out there. So yeah, that's the Multani problem. I'm gonna keep this deck and keep playing it in cEDH just because it's really fun to play. This is one of those decks you can sit down and goldfish for 30 minutes without repeating a game action. And you sit there with 50,000 mana in your mana pool because you pulled out your calculator because you need a calculator.
Yeah. This deck is pretty confusing. What's the best place for people to ask questions about it?
Well, they can drop a comment in the comment section of this YouTube video. They can find me over on Discord. I float around on most of the cEDH servers. Just Sakaven is my username. And then you can also go to this Moxfield deck and put a comment there too. I'll put a link to the deck in the description as well. And I'll answer any questions immediately because I have a passion for this deck and I know pretty much everything about it.
All right.
So
It's funny that at the end there you mentioned that you don't really know how many green land stacks there are in casual, which is funny because I didn't know how many Golos decks there were in casual, and I woke up to the notice that this card that I didn't know saw play was getting banned because it saw too much play. Let's talk about that.
yeah, let's talk about that. That hell of a segue, by the way, Prince.
Thank you.
So, ban list update. Golos is now banned, and Worldfire is unbanned. Start with Golos. He's the construct in the room. Actually, I think he's just a scout. I don't even think he's a construct because they couldn't fit it on the type line. But anyway.
Yeah, this card, we definitely knew it from like standard and historic because of what it did alongside Field of the Dead. Those decks were really fun. I thought they weren't too bad for the format when they got banned there. Obviously, we're talking about Golos in the commander setting, but that's really where his popularity started. However, I think, well, I don't have to think because the committee told us. We have their quotes. They're like, basically, this card's getting banned because unless you have a really commander-centric deck, he's just better than other commanders.
Yeah, I'm sure everyone has heard the exact wording of the banned list update.
Yeah. I'm still calculating exactly how I feel about that being the reasoning of getting Golos banned. There are just so many things to say about that.
Yeah.
I guess I'll start with that's just always going to be the case, is it not? There is always going to be commanders that are so good that if you do not have a commander-centric strategy, that is the commander you're playing. And banning the first place card in this, using this metric of judgment is only gonna crown the second place card.
Which, by the way, is
Um,
Corvold, Faker's king.
oh, is it really?
Yeah, and Cannith is right behind him.
Oh, so are you using popularity?
Yeah, I'm using popularity.
Oh, that's really interesting. I hadn't actually checked that.
Yeah, EDH Rec, Golos was number one. And now I'm going to go ahead and look at their listings today. Yep, Corvold is now number one.
I am baffled by that. Wow.
But I think it's interesting because Corvold right now has 6,229 decks, whereas Golos, as of yesterday, had over 7,000. It was the highest difference between two commanders in terms of number of decks.
Okay.
That like came in a row in popularity. It was far and away the most popular commander.
While we're on the subject of number of lists on EDH Rec, I did want to mention something that I really hope the committee did not do, and I don't think they did, but I think a lot of people might feel that they did and feel like it was the correct choice. And I want to explain something here that there isn't necessarily a correlation between the amount of lists that something has on EDH Rec and actual popularity. And the reason for this has to do with the dynamic of how many different and unique lists one commander can create. And I like to use an example of a deck like Edric. Edric is a deck that is either some kind of elf tribal, but also focused on his draw triggers, or you just focus on extra turns and getting these little unblockable things to hit your opponent just over and over again while you draw more cards and eventually steamroll into a win. Why am I bringing up Edric so randomly? It's because if I have two decks, one of them is Golos and one of them is Edric, and I have this tapped out account or Moxfield account, and I want to show off my decks, I'm not going to post an Edric deck that everyone has seen 100 times. Everyone knows, yeah, Edric, you make little 1/1 unblockable guys. You find all of them that you can. You start drawing cards. You start playing extra turn spells. Maybe you play something like Beastmaster Ascension to roll over your opponents. No one doesn't know how Edric wins. But this Golos deck, on the other hand, I could say, well, a lot of people build Golos in so many different ways. I don't know if anyone has quite built Golos the way that I have. And actually, this analogy is super true when it comes to me. I had this deck called, well, I still do. I'm just going to switch out the commander. Golos was literally meaningless. He was like marginally better than other things. He's a 5-mana crop rotation. He's not, okay. I'm getting off topic. This deck was called Mono Fact. Fact in this case being short for artifact.
Mm-hmm.
It had a companion. That companion was the fungus guy. I don't know the companion's name. He's not good.
Umori the Collector.
Thank you. Fungus Guy. What Fungus Guy does is that he reduces the cost of all of your artifacts by 1. But if you use him as your companion, you can't have any non-land card in your deck that's not an artifact. Meaning no instants, no sorceries, no... What else is there in this game?
Planeswalkers.
Enchantments, planeswalkers. Yeah, there you go. So I had just lands and things that were artifacts, and because my commander also was part of my deck for some reason, I don't know why they're considered part of your deck, but they are, so it also had to be a commander. So I was like, okay, so I got Scarecrow King, the dragon, Ramos,
Ramos, Dragon
and
Engine,
Golos,
and Golos.
and probably something else that I can't remember because it's bad. And I was like, well, all of these things are bad, but I guess Golos is the one that's not as bad, so I'm going to run that as a commander. Really, it's an Umori deck. And it was really fun, and it was funky, and I don't know if anyone else in the world had this kind of deck. And what's what's interesting is I could probably get together the five, if there's even five, resident Golos players in this area, and they would all have built a Golos deck differently because Golos doesn't lead you toward a certain path versus others. So because of this diversity, you're just it's just natural that you're going to see more people post lists of Golos because it's not one of those decks that people have seen 100 times. It's going to have your unique stamp on it. That doesn't mean that not as met that aren't more players playing Edric or Anya or Godo than what you see on EDH Rec. It just means they're not posting their lists because you already know what their list looks like. So it doesn't equate to actual popularity. So what I was getting to at the beginning is I really hope that in this decision wasn't made just by looking online and saying, oh man, there are so many Golos lists. Maybe Golos is constricting the format. Because it can very much be the case that there are just as many Golos decks as Corvold decks, but because there are just more unique ways you can build Golos, people are more inclined to, put their unique lists out there to show the world what they chose to do with this commander that lets you do multiple different things.
Yeah, that's interesting. And in their reasoning, they mentioned that Golos has been a much discussed card that is both popular to play and unpopular to play against. But they don't detail their sources. I don't know what sources the rules committee has access to, but is it only their own play group? It's a legitimate question. Are their play groups being called into question for was Golos overrepresented? Were they really thinking that any deck that wanted 5 colors and had a certain game plan should play Golos? Was that a thing that they saw in the wild? Because me too, I haven't seen a Golos deck in a long time. Many of the content creators who have already made videos on this say that this came out of left field. They hadn't seen Golos in a long time. In fact, the only Golos deck they knew of was their own really sweet, unique Golos deck.
Exactly. It's so baffling for so many reasons that I cannot even begin to explain why it's baffling. So many things came to mind as you were describing that. Um, and I just real quick want to go back to their mention of the fact that if your deck is not commander centric, it's the best thing to be doing. What is the big deal? Are people afraid that because Golos is so good, people are not going to want to build commander centric decks? Because commander, especially in casual, but also even in cEDH that is so cutthroat and streamlined, people love and praise creativity and coming up with something new and making things work that other people haven't been able to make work. I really don't think Golos effect has any effect on people that make a deck around something like uh, Omnath, the Gruul Omnath, and just putting a bunch of ramp spells in there and making that as streamlined as possible and making a deck really around that commander, or that the Selesnya Tristani, the life gain one that works really well with that Phyrexian artifact. It's like I really don't think people are leaving their archetypes that work so well around this one commander to build Golos decks that just don't work with their commander. They might be building Golos decks, but it's not killing anything else that exists in the format. And secondly, Golos isn't one archetype that is taking over the format like you would see in Standard, where one card, like Siege Rhino back in Cons, was forcing everyone to play Siege Rhino. Siege Rhino wasn't even banned. So
Oh, Smuggler's Copter. That's a
not the best
better
example. Or
example.
maybe it's a better example because not even this card that was so homogenizing got banned. And Golos, they like to say, well, like, it's just the thing to be doing if you're not doing this. Yeah, but that thing represents so many different deck lists, like I've just gone over. It's like they think if you sit at a table and people pull out Golos, you're going to be rolling your eyes and be like, oh, it's this Golos deck again. I'm going to be seeing nothing but Golos, when every Golos deck is so different. It's so superficial. to think that because you're seeing the same commander over and over again, you're going to get bored, even if all of these lists are super different from each other. I don't understand how this negatively affects anyone.
Yeah, I think one thing to be said though is that the way EDH Rec functions is that they when you search for ideas for a commander deck based on a certain commander, it shows you the average cards included in those decks. That might have had a homogenizing effect on people who were looking to build new Golos decks. But you bring
It's
up a good
possible.
point in that people who choose Golos are not choosing Golos because they want to build a Golos deck. They're choosing him because they want to build a deck, and they need a commander for that deck because the commander for that deck doesn't already exist.
Yeah.
But here's the rest of the RC's statement on him. It says there are many problems with the card, but the greatest is that in the low to middle tiers where we focus the ban list, Golos is simply a better choice of leader for all but the most commander-centric decks. One thing I want to point out here is they admit that they consider there to be tiers in EDH. Like they want to focus the ban list to the low to middle tiers of their format. But who's defining that? Many prolific content creators in recent months have outlined how ridiculous the idea of a tier list is for this format. How fluid it is, how hard it is to talk about it, and how easy it is to be misrepresented if you make an arbitrary list of tiers.
Yeah, I think this was the best way the committee could think of saying, of responding to what was eventually going to happen from people like us, our reaction to the ban. And by us, I mean the more competitive players, either really high streamlined commander or straight up competitive cEDH players, which the reaction was, what? Golos? Did Golos CD play?
Yeah.
I like there's a in cEDH, I guess we should mention for anyone listening who might not be as familiar with the format, there is a Golos deck that is an ad nauseum deck, a very popular type of strategy here because it's the best, most efficient way to go fast and win fast with this card ad nauseum. And Golos exists as, I guess, a subtype of those decks where you can have them to have access to 5 colors. And it's cool because when you cast him, you can find this card called Boseiju, who shelters all. It's a land card. He puts it into play. You can untap next turn. You can cast Ad Nauseam, and because you used Boseiju, your Ad Nauseam can't be countered. This is cool. I don't know how you feel about this, but I liked the existence of this Golos deck because, first of all, it was not the best Ad Nauseam deck. I don't think it was even top 3, maybe even top 5. It just gave your deck, because Ad Nauseam decks are decks. They're not built around commanders. They're built around good stuff, and commanders add a little bit of flexibility. And Golos was a way to tweak your deck to better fight metas. If you thought everyone was going to come prepared for Ad Nauseam, but Ad Nauseam is what you play best, maybe you would benefit from bringing in Golos as a commander to get beside you, and it'll give you an edge over other Ad Nauseam players and people who weren't prepared for uncounterable Ad Nauseam. Now
Yeah,
they don't
I
have
thought that was
that
interesting.
option.
I like that strategy existing in
Yeah,
cEDH.
I agree. And the fact that we don't have that option anymore, it's honestly not the biggest deal in the world. It's such a small change to the format, but it's a little bit demoralizing. Of the few opinions I have about Golos leaving our format, none of them are positive.
Yeah, I agree.
But anyway, back to the point I was trying to make is I think the committee in using that statement of like, oh, low to mid tiers, they were like, hey, high level guys, this is gonna seem weird to you, but we promise it was a problem for the rest of the format. I don't know. You've seen content from non cEDH, like non cEDH
Oh,
opinions?
many, many. I spent all day at work yesterday listening to them. The immediate opinions, the eventual opinions, and this morning too. Of all the most prolific content creators, what they thought about it.
So I assume that they all agree with the committee. It was a really big problem in their low to mid tiers.
No, in fact, the most influential content creators were shocked. They were
Huh.
they didn't like it. Um, some of them, and most didn't have a strong opinion about it, and I just didn't sense any of the problem. Like where was the problem? One thing I want to mention is that in the rules committee's statement, it it mentions that you can drop Golos in and a few 5-color lands into a random deck and get all the ramp and card advantage you would ever want from a commander with no worries about your mana base. That statement only holds true if the land that you get is Cascading Cataracts. There aren't any other lands that grant mana abilities to your other cards. There's the World Tree. That's a new one. But Cascading Cataracts is the only one that is indestructible and makes it hard to interact with. And it's not like you immediately get all the card advantage you want. You have to pay 7, look at the top 3 cards, and get random spells off the top. It doesn't let you cast your hand for free. It doesn't draw cards. And it only ramps a little bit. There's so many other better ways to ramp.
Guys, we're talking about a 5 mana crop rotation here. He's a 5 mana crop rotation. Yeah, you don't have to sacrifice a land. That's great. In exchange, you do have to pay an extra 4 mana. 5 mana crop rotation.
Oh, it's
in what world is this too good?
It enters tap too. It's not even crop rotation. It's just half of an Hour of Promise.
No matter what angle I try to look at this from, it doesn't make sense. Except for maybe they mistook the name of the card they were actually trying to ban for Golos.
Well, I don't know, because no other card fits this description.
And no, yeah, I'm pretty much joking, but it's so crazy. No, even if I'm looking at it through the lens of a casual commander player, which I was at one point, I can't see any reason why this would cause any sort of problem. I don't see people being butthurt about this being in the format, and apparently no one else does. Basically, I thought I would have been alone, waking up being like super confused about this ban, and I would get on the internet and everyone would give me the reasons as to why Golos was so toxic, and I would be like, thank you, now I understand. But what I'm hearing is all the most competitive players in the format heard this news and were like, what? Golos got banned. And all of the casual players in the format heard the news and said, what? Golos got banned? Like, nobody gets this.
Yes, there were some supporters of the banning, though, even among the prolific content creators. But they just their reasons were that they thought the card was too easy. Too easy. That was the word. Too easy to build around. Too easy to win the game with. It just. There is some truth to the statement that you could take a below average deck, put Golos as the commander, add some lands, and you would improve the overall effectiveness of the deck. However, that goes for adding any powerful card to your deck.
I agree. If your deck has blue in it and it doesn't have Cyclonic Rift, adding Cyclonic Rift makes it a better deck.
I think Mons from cEDH TV put it best. He said that the casual players figured out that Hull Breacher was really good. And when they figured out how to use it, it got banned. Because that's not a play pattern that the rules committee wants to encourage. Right. With Golos, casual players figured out that it was good, built around it. A lot of them did. It's the most prolific on EDH Rec. I don't know how that reflects to real life, but it was a card that should not have been played in casual, was the way he put it.
Oh.
That there wasn't much reason to be playing Golos. in a casual game.
Because he wasn't good enough for casual purposes?
It's not that he wasn't good enough, it's that he didn't do
I mean, that's what I
anything
would argue.
unique. He didn't do anything unique or interesting. Beyond just not being good enough, it wasn't
Well,
it wasn't a reason to build a deck. The card wasn't a reason to build a deck. He was just the helm of a pile.
I'm going to
And
go even further than that. I'm going to make the argument that he just was not good enough in casual, straight up. So the committee says the greatest problem is in the low to middle tiers where we focus the ban list. That's what they said. That's a direct quote. The low to middle tier. So they're talking about like maybe entry level players, you think?
yeah, probably
That's
where
kind of
precons
so
sit.
here, um, what's the best advice that content creators that are big on Commander tend to give these low tier players? Is it not to buy the awesome Commander products that Wizards of the Coast makes? Isn't this what the professor keeps pushing? Because they're some of the best quality products that come out in Magic. Now, here's my question. If you took any of the precons from any year and removed the commander and put in Golos, would you get a better deck? Because
Well,
I don't think you would.
if the deck has any coherent theme, I don't think you would, unless
I
it
don't think
involves
you would either.
lands and giant spells.
Here's a different question. If a player of that low tier just didn't have anything to do with a precon, but their friends all bought precons and they were given Golos because it was so overpowered and they built a deck around it, being new to Commander, not having the best understanding about what cards are good, what cards are not, would they build a deck that's better than the precons of their friends bought?
I'm
Because I
not
don't think they
sure.
would. I don't think they would. I don't think the deck would have a powerful enough engine in comparison to decks that are built around that are commander centric. I actually have a hard time believing that Golos is a problem in this low tier that they're describing.
Yeah, take okay to do a direct comparison. Compare Golos to Corvold, the next most popular.
Yeah.
That deck will always be a commander centric deck because Corvold is very powerful, draws
Yeah,
cards.
of course. Heck, I've tried to build a Corvold list, and they didn't come out that great. It takes a slight bit of skill knowing what your Corvold deck doesn't want to be doing versus what it does, and actually making it good. I was so shocked when you said that Corvold was second place, because wasn't third Cannith?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's what I expected to come in second place. The other like, whoa, you can do multiple different things because you have all five colors and it doesn't lead you in one direction. But you throw Corvold in there, that really throws a wrench into my formula. Wow. And you're totally right. Like you don't just build a Corvold deck for the sake of building a Corvold deck. He leads you at least slightly in some direction. He could have been a precon command. Wait, was he? He was, wasn't he?
Corvold. Yeah, he was the precon commander for Throne of Eldraine.
Yeah, shows what I know. Um,
Well,
yeah, I don't. You,
that's even better example because in that case, if they're Eldraine precon decks, the Golos deck is if one person created a Golos deck and it was entry level, that wouldn't compete with the stock Corvold deck at all. What's interesting is that I think they might have just been misnaming the problem. If their problem, so their other things they say is that it makes it too easy to have five colors and cast free spells. In a game where they have said they want 8 and 9 mana spells to happen, they want them to be viable, but on turn 8 and 9 is another thing that they're implying. They want games to last at least that long. If you have a Golos in your command zone, you can pretty easily get yourself to being able to activate his ability. And so I think what they have a problem with is not power level. It might be genericism, like that Golos just does what he does, and it's not very unique. You put cards into the deck, and your Golos deck, like Golos as a card, is, if you imagine a play group where everyone has Golos as their commander. I don't know. I keep running in circles in my head, because if they want to promote only the most commander centric decks, and like they want people to use their creativity like that, the Golos promoted creativity. He didn't detract from it. He wasn't.
Sounds like an interesting deck. Golos versus Golos versus Golos versus
I think
Golos.
it's happened online. There's videos of it. It says, they say its presence crushes the kind of diversity and choice they want to promote. But if there's anything that gives you diversity and choice, it's Golos. I could build a less powerful but maybe more interesting version of Multani with Golos as a commander.
Yeah, I can build most of my good stuff cEDH decks as Golos decks, and they would lose out on a lot of things. But it would be a diverse Golos deck in some play groups.
Yeah, like, I think it would be fun to play a Golos deck where you don't care about his ability. You just care that you can tutor a land from the command zone.
Well, yeah, here's the thing about his activated ability, which I often forget that he has. I can speak from personal experience because I did have a Golos deck, and it wasn't a cEDH deck. I kind of wish that I had experimented with him in competitive Commander just so that I could further point out how ludicrous this ban is. But alas, I have one example instead of two. In this mono fact deck that I was talking about, this highly unique, very big brain play of building an artifact only deck that I had.
Uh-huh. Very unique.
Golos, I would often cast to go get Cabal Coffers when I didn't just have an engine rolling. Sometimes I would tutor out a land that would let me activate Golos' ability, but whenever I would do that, my deck would all of a sudden feel worse. And I think maybe, I don't know, maybe some people would disagree, but I think that translates to every single deck. If you're activating Golos' ability, you're not in a great place if you have a Golos deck. Because, sure, you could have very powerful cards in your deck. You could have humongous haymakers. You could spin Golos and potentially hit Rise from the Dark
Rise of the Dark Realms.
Rise of the Dark Realms. You could hit Insurrection, and you could hit
Expropriate.
Expropriate. That's exactly the card I was thinking of. Thank you for fishing that out of my brain. That's great, but you have, what, 80 cards in your library? You could also hit 3 lands. Would you not rather have Expropriate in your hand and use that mana to cast it instead of hoping that you hit something cool with Golos? Would you not rather Insurrection, kill someone?
Yeah, if I'm building a deck with Golos as the commander, for me, I use the commander as a template for what strategy I want to build. Golos, what he tells me to do is play some lands, play some ramp, just enough to get Golos on the battlefield and activate his ability. The rest of the non-land cards are all haymakers.
Ooh.
But did many people really do that?
I want to say no. I want to hope not. That's a lot of money for a deck that doesn't sound amazing. Because you have this problem of you have to put enough ramp in there to A, get out Golos and activate his ability quick enough, and B, if they don't let you have Golos, hard cast these haymakers. But the more ramp you put in there, the more it can disrupt his own ability. It's kind of like the problem of counterspells in the Maelstrom Wanderer decks, where like if you put too many counterspells in there, you're gonna cascade into counterspells. Well, with Golos, you put too much ramp in there, you're gonna use his activated ability to get more ramp. And if you don't put enough ramp in there, well, congratulations, your deck is slow.
Yeah, compared to Narset, actually.
Oh, Yeah.
Narset and Lion Master is 1 more mana than Golos, has hexproof, so you can't just remove it, and casts non-creature cards from the top 4 without paying their mana costs. Just like, and you don't have to pay the 7 to get this.
Right.
That deck is not, it's like not the greatest either.
No. Well, it doesn't have all the colors.
Yeah, it doesn't have all the colors. It used to be a menace of casual tables, but people slowly phased it out.
Yeah, it also got hit with the mulligan rule change, which is something that people often forget, is that the mulligan rule used to be you choose what cards to shuffle back and then draw. And I didn't know this until it was explained to me that when that got changed to traditional mulligan rule, Narset got hit hard because it used to abuse the heck out of that.
Wait, how did the old mulligan rule work? I don't think I entered when that was a thing.
Yeah, no, I didn't either. It was explained to me. It's in Commander, you would take your hand of 7 and you would choose which ones you wanted and which ones you didn't, and you would shuffle back the ones you didn't and draw that many.
Oh, that's great with Narset.
Yeah, it's like, I drew a bunch of these extra turn spells, but that's okay because I can just strip them back. And like, yeah, maybe you draw some more again, but that's the extra shot that matters. Anyway, I find it hard to believe that ability is what was the problem with Golos.
Yeah, and
is that really the best way to cheat out big spells?
Oh, I don't know if you've heard this, but the rest of their statement is Golos' ability effectively reduces the commander tax to 1, and once you hit 7 mana, with Golos assuring that you have Wooburg and helping you get there quickly, you don't need to do anything for the rest of the game except cast spells for free, something we always want to be careful about. We've talked to the folks in Studio X, that's the place that designs Magic, and they understand the problems created by generically powerful 5-color commanders that don't have Wooburg in their mana cost. We don't expect similar cards to come from them in the future, so a surgical strike now makes sense. We understand that many players love Golos, so we don't take this action lightly. In the end, the health of the format is our primary concern, and we find Golos unhealthy. While Cannith Return King is a similarly flexible and popular commander for good stuff 5-color decks, we see it as a clear step down from Golos. And that's the end of the statement.
Yeah, I mean, I guess Prince was wrong. It looks like the activator ability was the huge problem according to the committee.
Yeah, and they went so far as to talk to Studio X and suggest they no longer design cards that have 5-color identity without also have 5-color cost.
And you know what? That result doesn't really offend me. I didn't think Golos was too good. I don't think whether more Golos-like cards get printed or not remotely affects anything that we're doing. I just think it's really weird how out of touch they are with a lot of the player base, according to not just you and I, of course. If we disagree with their actions, it's not that big of a deal. But if enough content creators are saying, hey, this is stupid, it might just be stupid.
Yeah, and honestly, I wish they had hit Cannith instead. I think Cannith actually has a real effect on metagames. And particularly coming from a cEDH background, Cannith has a big effect there in that, you can do whatever you want to do with Cannith. Cannith reanimates. Cannith gives you haste and trample. Cannith draws cards. Cannith is an infinite mana outlet. Cannith cares about +1/+1 counters. Cannith is a 5/5 for 5.
Cannith is the card that I was afraid that they would hit. Golos was not remotely in my radar. Wow. Yeah, that's so interesting, because they do mention Cannith.
Yep, and I think I think maybe they subscribe to the white is terrible thing, and the fact that Cannith costs a white to play makes him not as good.
But Nah, I doubt it. I think it's just because it can't cast free spells. That's mainly why
Yeah.
I said that I was wrong and the activated ability was a big deal. It wasn't because they told me.
Mm-hmm.
It was because they didn't ban Kenrith, and that's the only difference. Well, to be fair, Kenrith isn't a 5 mana crop rotation, so maybe it's just not that powerful, guys.
Yeah.
In any case, if Kenrith does get banned, it's just the same thing as Thrasios plus any other commander. It's like it wouldn't really affect us. It would just be weird, and I would feel a little bit uneasy knowing that they could just ban something for reasons that they pull out of their tinfoil hats.
Yeah, I'm worried. Are they gonna? And I find it weird that they hit Golos. Sure, Golos is the most popular single card as commander, but they didn't mention anything about partner and
No, in
how.
fact, they printed more partners.
Well, the RC didn't have any
Oh
say
yeah,
in those printing.
you're right. You're right. You're right.
If Magic officiated this ban list, we'd be in a different world.
I agree.
But and so I appreciate that fact. But like, okay, so like I think the reason why they hit Golos instead of Kenrith was, yeah, they cast spells for free. I think the fact that he could cast spells for free was the reason he was more popular than Kenrith.
Yeah.
Like but okay, so all of this to say that it seems inconsistent.
Yeah. No.
They
I
hit
literally
one
making
card.
fun. Sorry, I'm making fun of the fact that he's a 5 mana crop rotation, but I literally use him as a 5 mana crop rotation way more than I use him to try to hit good spells for free.
That's true. Yeah. Of note. But this decision seems inconsistent to me. There wasn't any discourse about this card before it happened. At least with Hull Breacher and Flash and like Iona, people kind of they knew why those cards were banned.
We had heard the complaints before, sure.
I had never heard anyone complain about Golos.
I had never heard anyone talk about Golos except for that one guy down in Jacksonville who had like 5 Golos decks, and I was like, "Way to go, you! You're tacky. You're doing something no one else is doing. You picked your favorite commander and you built a bunch of decks because he allows you to do that." But I guess it wasn't unique.
I guess not. I guess the
I guess not.
commander was the problem. I don't know. Oh boy. It's
Well,
hard. It's hard to talk. It's hard to talk too much about this band.
apparently, yeah, and I don't know. Sometimes it feels like it's hard not to talk too much about this band. I literally I went into this call with you saying that I thought it was the least important of the two decisions made to the band, and I just can't stop talking about it because it just the more things pop into my head, it's just inconceivable. I can't. Ugh. It feels like it's melting my brain cells.
Yeah,
I don't know where it's coming from.
one thing I said that I want to point out, where I kind of summed it up in like I think it was a YouTube comment, was that I I'm okay with like them banning for different reasons, but I need them overall to become consistent because what the rules committee is using the ban list for doesn't make sense. They're using it as a what they call a guideline for players to know what not to play, and let rule zero decide the rest. You can take your Golos deck still to a LGS, sit down with people, and ask them if it's okay if you play with your deck, even though it has a banned card as its commander. And plenty of people will say yes. But many people will say no, but not have reasons for it. They'll say no because it's on the ban list. The ban list simultaneously, they want it to serve as a guidepost, and yet people can't help but use it as a hard rule.
Oh, of course.
And then they have stated before that if they wanted to use the ban list to guide what players play and what players don't play, they would have 300 plus cards on it. Honestly, I would rather that. I want a thorough ban list, or I don't want any ban list.
I
This in between
completely agree.
keeps causing backlash and conflict and controversy whenever they make a decision.
Yeah, and I'm kind of glad that everyone is on the same page as you and I, with basically everyone reading this. The ban list is just supposed to be used as a guideline, and being like, yeah, no, that's not a guideline. Those are just rules. No one's gonna be over here playing like, oh, this is how Commander is played in this city. This is how it's played at my kitchen table, but this is how you play it at LGS. This is the ban list for this place. This is the ban list for this other place. I've got them all printed out so that we can switch cards in and out. Yeah, no one does that. And I'm pretty big into an MMO that basically has an entire server that comes back in and out. That's really really popular called Hardcore, which is where when your character dies, it's just gone. It's deleted. You can't use it again. It's permadeath basically.
Yep.
And there's a very famous content creator from this MMO that loves this, and people would tell him, yeah, but permadeath guilds have been around for a long time. You could basically, this is how you play under the rules where you had to delete your character if you died. He was like, no, you guys, it's not the same thing, and this is why everyone thinks it's so. Everyone loves hardcore, and no one was into permadeath before. It's because the fact that before, if you died, you could be like, yeah, well, but it didn't count, and you could just reset.
You could
And
stop playing
even
permadeath after that moment.
exactly, even if people didn't do that, even if no one did that, not a single person, the fact that you could is so important that everyone was like, it's not worth it. Why bother? It's like, it's not a real rule. It wasn't until the game said, okay, for this server, it's the rule. This is how it's going to work. That everyone just got so hyped about it. It was like, now it's real. And that's how people interpret rules. That's how we have to. It's like, you can't use them as a guideline. It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, like I can't sit down with my 8.5 tails deck and say, hey guys, I'm playing mono white, and we all know that it's kind of hard to play with mono white. So I have balance in this deck. So is it okay if I play it? No one's gonna tell me yes. No
Or
one.
even if they do, they won't feel good about it because you're playing a game that they didn't come prepared to play.
Yeah, nobody comes to every play group, and this applies mostly to, well, the majority of players don't have a one consistent play group. That's almost impossible to get. You are so lucky if you have a consistent play group,
Especially one that you like.
especially one that you like. Most people, they go out to the LGS on a Friday or a Saturday or a Sunday, and they're like, I want to be playing Commander with people. I just care that I'm playing the game. And when they go, they assume that the ban list is the hard rule because it's the only way you can logically do it. You can't go and be like, well, okay, I mean, if they let me play no ban list, this is what I'd do. But then if they're playing no ban list, like, what could they possibly do? All these things. What if I go up against Leovold? That's not a thing that people think about. They take the ban list as a hard rule and they play everything they can outside of the ban list.
Yeah, exactly. You don't just carry around time walks for when some guy comes over and shows up with his all no ban list cEDH deck and asks if he can play it, so that you can slot in your no ban list card so that you can play. Yeah, yeah, no, I totally get you.
Like, and as a proponent of land destruction, I play a card like Decree of Annihilation, and players react as though the card is like the worst thing in the world, and yet it's not banned. It's just suggested that you don't play it because they made it a social pariah, not because anyone actually told me not to play the card.
Yeah.
There aren't similar statuses for cards that are popular. You can't, the collective player base is not going to decide that something's too popular and stop playing it.
No.
And that brings us to the unban of Worldfire.
Oh baby.
So let me read the statement to start with, just so we have that all in our faces. Worldfire was once banned due to the problematic interaction with floating mana and having access to your commander. We want to foster a commander environment where 8 and 9 mana spells are viable and likely to show up in a game, so we evaluate the expensive ones on that context. Unlike Coalition Victory and Biorhythm, which we continue to believe are problematic in that environment, the level of effort needed to make Worldfire effective is sufficient that we suspect it will not be as much of an issue. There are already cheaper ways to do similar things in the format. We believe the social contract and robust pre-game discussions will keep Worldfire out of games in which it does not belong.
I appreciate that last sentiment.
I appreciate it, but I don't agree with it because it's either going to keep Worldfire out of any game that's casual, or like how. My question is, did they really unban Worldfire?
That's a great question.
Because sure, I'm allowed to put Worldfire in my deck. Well, I can't even use the word allowed because they want this to be a guideline, right? It's no longer on the guidelines for cards you can't play. But neither is Armageddon, or Apocalypse, or Decree of Annihilation, or Obliterate. So suddenly I cast Worldfire and I'm okay? Of course not. Nobody wants to play against Worldfire. In fact, this unbanning came as more of a surprise than Golos, in that people were like, oh, that's a card. That could be interesting. And then the more they think about it, or the first time they play against him, they're like, no, I'm never going to do this again.
Yeah. I discovered today that I had a completely different reason for thinking that this card was on the ban list than the committee did. In fact, because I'm the opinionated one here, I'm going to go ahead and say that the committee did not know why this card was banned, because the problems that they claim they don't think are bad enough to keep it on the ban list are not the problems with this card.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So my opinion is a little bit different to what you were talking about, because you're thinking of this as like another mass land destruction spell that everyone hates because it attacks a resource that they're not prepared to get attacked, and their entire deck is built in a way in which you won't function if this is attacked. And I agree with this, but I think by far the most important part of this card is that life total clause. And the reason is because it turns the game into a different game that people didn't come prepared to play. And it's the same kind of deal with Biorhythm and Coalition Victory and spells that just outright win the game. All three of these are in the same boat for me. And I think it's funny that they say that the conditions for this one are harder to meet. They're basically saying, yeah, red is really bad in this format, so we don't care. I kind of love that.
Yeah, I think that's a little hilarious.
But, yeah, all of these are in the same boat because competitive players will argue, well, this is so hard to win with. You can just Oracle Consultation for 8 less mana than any of these.
You could just tooth a nail for the same mana cost.
Right. But that's not the issue for me for why these cards are banned in a casual setting. It's because you have to have actual intention with those other two. These cards, you're like, oh, that's cool. They win the game. I can use this as a win condition. And what happens is all of a sudden you're playing this game. You're playing this casual game where your life total matters, your creatures matter, the amount of cards in your hand matter. And then someone plays one of these cards, and then all of a sudden all of that stops mattering. It's about changing the game from all of these different resources that people were racing to amass to all of a sudden, does someone have card X or do they not? Does someone have a counterspell for it or do they not? See, when someone resolves something like Worldfire, sure, the game isn't over, but everything that you did in the game up to that point suddenly becomes completely meaningless.
Yeah.
And for the longest time, that's when people ask me why Worldfire is on the ban list. I was like, well, it's because of that. It's because once it resolves, everything that anyone did in the game stops mattering. And all of a sudden, it gets unbanned, and the rules committee is, oh, it's actually not bad because of this. And then this has nothing to do with why it was on the ban list. It's like they completely missed the point. They're treating it like a win condition, like, oh, but it's not like Coalition Victory because you need more effort. More effort. That's not why it was on the ban list.
Yeah, it's true. Although Worldfire is the least egregious of the cards that change the game without ending it, in that a life total of 1, someone is going to end the game very quickly after
It sh-
resolving this.
yes, and it should be random, which no one likes. No one likes like what this card is like, let's spin the dice and see who wins, and then we'll shuffle up and play the next game. That's what this card is.
Yeah, essentially that's
Unless,
what it is.
unless, and I'm pretty sure this is what they're talking about when they say it takes more effort to break it, in that you would not play this card unless you're intending to break it. And for that, you would need a commander that's cheap and can kill people. I'm thinking of like Dash In
Norin
Ragavan.
the Wary.
Sure, Norin the Wary is a good one. Zozu the Punisher, Kroxa I've heard of. Any of
Norin's
these
great because
commanders.
he exiles himself when he casts Worldfire and then just comes back.
Norin is probably the best, not gonna lie. I think this slots into every Norin list that probably didn't exist, but maybe.
But there's an inconsistency there because they're saying that they're unbanning this card because you have to have intent to play it and it takes more effort to win with it.
Yeah.
Wasn't the reason that Hull Breacher was banned is because not enough players were playing it with intent and knowing what they were doing? That players were playing it not knowing what they were doing and creating non-games.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you're right. I think there is an answer to this question that's probably, it's really easy to look at the card Worldfire and say, oh, I don't want to be doing this if I'm not going to break it. Whereas with Hull Breacher, you can look at it and say, oh, this card's really good. And then accidentally run into, oh, whoops, I just emptied everyone's hands, and now we're just going to be stuck here for a little while.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I don't think Worldfire should ever have been banned, but I also don't like why do they still think Coalition Victory and Biorhythm are too easy to win with?
Yeah.
Biorhythm, like, compare those cards to legal cards like Expropriate or Tooth and Nail. Expropriate is a lot of mana. I forget if it's. Let me look up Expropriate's
I
mana
want to say it's
cost.
8? Six colorless and 2 blue? No, 3 blue, 6 color. Wait, hold on. uh, 2
Oh,
blue,
it's
7
9.
colorless?
It's 2 blue and 7 colorless.
Yes.
So
Third time's the
Expropriate
charm.
is 9 mana. Okay, that's in this realm, and the command zone have talked about this a lot. How Expropriate just 90% of the time will win you the game, and it does that alone. Whereas you take Biorhythm, you have to have creatures in play. In Coalition Victory, you have to have creatures and lands that are very specific in play for it to win the game. Whereas Expropriate and Tooth and Nail win the game on the spot. Where's the consistency? You can't use Coalition Victory and Biorhythm as signposts to not play Expropriate and Tooth and Nail because the cards are so drastically different.
Yeah, this is a conversation I've heard a lot, and I've always been okay with this, just because everyone should understand that there are ways that you could build your deck where you maximize efficiency so well that you can easily win by turn 2 or 3. I think that as commander players, even for those who have no interest in competitive, everyone should understand that that is the highest level that you can achieve if you so choose of efficiency. And those two cards are just cards that are on their way to that efficiency, and some to that level of efficiency, and somewhere, like, if there's a graph where, like, here's super casual, here is Thassa's Oracle Turbo Nas, um those tooth and nail cards would be somewhere along that line of, yeah, it's not only this card, but your intention with the card, the way that you ramp into it, what you get. Wow. It's so hard to put it into words, but with Coalition Victory, there you can have no intention other than just having the card be cool. Hmm. Win out of nowhere. Tooth and Nail does win out of nowhere.
Yeah, but you have to design your deck where two creatures can win instantly.
Maybe that's the thing. Maybe you can choose to use Tooth and Nail in a way where it's just a value card, and you can't do that with Coalition Victory. And what does Biorhythm do? You win the game? Oh
No,
no,
by
each
them,
player's life.
each player's life totals becomes the number of creatures they control.
That's so funny that I just suggested that it said win the game.
That doesn't say win
I
the game.
No, it doesn't. It wouldn't be, I I literally think it wouldn't be overpowered if this card were 8 mana and said you win the game. I literally don't.
Yeah, I don't think it would either.
Um Now that's a little bit unfair because of the specific format where you and I come from.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be a really boring card for casual.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, do you have a counter spell? No? Cool.
I mean, so is Expropriate. They're releasing Worldfire to the environment where they know that they would want to ban a card like Expropriate because you accidentally win the game with Expropriate. Because that doesn't depend on how you built your deck or what your intentions are. It
I guess
depends on the
not.
decisions you make when you play it. I
Well, it
just
can. I think we take for granted that everyone who plays Expropriate for the most part, or at least that has played it against me, is a fairly competent deck builder, even as far as casual is concerned. I don't know if you can fill your deck full of centaurs and cast Expropriate and have a 100% win rate.
I mean, you can if what you do is if your opponents are like, I don't want you to take 4 extra turns, so I'm going to give you my best permanent, and you take all 3 other commanders, and you get 1 extra turn.
Yeah, maybe.
Your deck, like Expropriate, makes it not about you anymore.
But people's decisions still kind of affect how that card turns up.
Yeah, they definitely do, and I mean, but is that not the same as saying you're playing Coalition Victory in a deck that only has like one very very small way of actually triggering it? Would someone put a Expropriate in a deck where they don't think it'll win the game? Do you want to play a 9 mana spell and not win the game?
Mm, I would, even if it doesn't win on the spot, as long as the percentage chance of victory eventually hits really high numbers, like 85% or upward.
Yeah, and that's how it's been on covered commander games from like the command zone in specific.
But I think a card like Coalition Victory that literally says you win the game just leaves a sour taste in the mouth for casual players who don't always win the game through an infinite combo. Because when a
Mm-hmm.
card says you win the game, then any card that doesn't say that suddenly loses all of its value. All of that damage you dealt, all of the life you gained, all those cards you drew, all those creatures you killed, they're all just numbers that don't say you win the game like this one card does.
I mean, how
And
is
even
that
though,
different from Worldfire though? You're because Coalition Victory says all the cards that you've done so far don't matter, and so does
oh,
Worldfire.
yeah, well, Worldfire does say that in a sense, in its meaning. It implies that, but it doesn't say you. It says someone out here wins the game. That's it. One of you lucky people is
So
going to maybe in 15 minutes, or if you're lucky, sooner, win this game.
so they're more okay with the card saying everything's meaningless, one of us randomly wins, than a
They're
card
okay
that
because
says
it's so
everything's
bad.
meaningless and I win.
They're expecting everyone to look at this card and be like, "Oh yeah, this card is so bad that I can that like I can't even conceive of playing it." Being like, "Yes, you're so far ahead. You have 9 mana. Flip a coin. No, roll a die. Roll a four-sided die, and if you roll a four, you win the game, and if you roll anything else, you lose." They're gonna be like, "This is the most trash 9 mana card." that's ever been printed, I'm not going to play it unless I'm super chaotic evil. But even if they are, they could just get hated out of their playgroup, which I think low key is what the committee is implying here. They're like, yeah, if people start playing this, I feel like they're gonna get hated out of their playgroups because it's just such a bad card.
And yeah,
And
unbanning it doesn't actually unban it. That's comes back to my original question. Did they really unban Worldfire?
I don't think they like it doesn't serve a purpose sitting on the ban list, taking up space. Like when people look up the ban list to
Mm-hmm.
see what they can't use, it doesn't. And
Well,
I
then
don't
what?
want people's time to be wasted scrolling through Worldfire, reading it, and then figuring out, oh, this card is so bad that you can't use it.
But then what
They
is the
literally
purpose of any
don't trust
card?
you to be responsible enough to not play this card. So they put it in the ban list. They put it on the shelf way up here so we can't reach it. So we're not tempted to play the most awful card that's ever existed.
Then what are they expecting the purpose of the cards in the ban list to be? If they're trying to use it as a guide of what to play and what not to play, why? What's stopping them from actually banning everything they want to ban? Because if they keep using them as suggestions where the community already has its own mindset towards cards, it's why nobody plays land destruction. It's essentially banned.
Yeah. You
They
know,
didn't go and ban every card that destroys all lands, though.
this whole deal with the guidelines, I mentioned that basically all players don't believe that these are just guidelines, and I don't think the committee does either. I don't think they believe themselves when they say you can just use these as guidelines. I think they know that it's a real ban list, but they have to say it just because they're like, well, we're not wizards, we're just a committee.
Yeah,
Uh,
they're trying to get out of an obligation to
yeah,
manage an unmanageable format.
but yeah, this whole I mean, we've been screwed from the beginning with this ban list because of just with the amount of different ways that people play Commander. There's no way that this ban list is going to appeal to everyone, and it's going to not make sense from some perspective, no matter what they do.
Yeah,
And
that's a fair point.
here's a really interesting point that people who don't play cEDH, or even people who do play cEDH, don't often notice is if you took all of the cards off of the ban list, um, and then tested out the game for I don't know, like a week, a month, and then the committee had to ban one card. One of those cards at the top of the radar, which everyone assumes that Time Walk would be the first to like take an extra 2 mana. What get out of
No,
here, right?
Time
It's
Vault.
overpowered. It's
Time Vault, I think, is the first one.
Time Vault, super broken. You're taking extra turns. You can take infinites.
Yeah, with just the
It's
voltaic key.
yeah. It's all of the like Tolarian Academy. Like what get that out of here? It's busted. I literally think that maybe the number one contender for the first card to be banned if everything came off the ban list is Ad Nauseam, because it's the only card that you could easily get to on turn one that wins the game by itself. I'm not saying it would for sure get the first ban. There are cards that can do it with less mana as long as you just have another card. Any tutor gets you to it, like Time Vault, Flash Hulk.
Yeah,
But Ad
but
Nauseam,
outside of combos, Ad Nauseam's the one. It's the one that does it.
Ad Nauseam is 5 mana win the game, which you can get to if you have the power 9. So isn't that kind of crazy that we're even considering that the first card to be banned, if we could only choose one, is a card that's currently unbanned in our format?
Yeah, and I think
Because I
that's
didn't think this at first. I made a Reddit comment once, and someone who actually is a fan of and plays a lot of no banless Commander said, actually, Time Walk's not wouldn't be on our personal ban list, like what watch list at first. Ad Nauseam is just way better. And I was like, at first I was like, no, let me explain to you why you're wrong. And then I fished a little bit in my mind, and I was like, holy crap, this guy's right. 2 mana, take an extra turn is not as good as Ad Nauseam.
Yeah, and I think that brings me back to Mons's video today, talking about the ban. He said that he's worried because as soon as casual players figure out that you can just cast ad nauseum and win the game, that you're like, I'm gonna build this deck where I gain a bunch of life and then I can use a sweet card called ad nauseum to draw a bunch of cards. As soon as they figure that out and it becomes mainstream, it'll probably get banned.
Well, I think that's true, but I don't think that they will, because I think there's a line there that's super, super duper blurred. Like, it's the most blurred line you can think of, but there's still a line there where a casual player will look at ad nauseum lists and say, I have to play all of these cards. I can't play any of these fun cards that cost like 1 extra mana because of this one card, just so I can win. Winning is fun, but if it comes at the cost of the fun of the rest of the format.
Well, I don't think that's the procedure they take. They don't look at at a competitive ad nauseum list when they want to play ad nauseum. I think it's the Allura player in the back of the room who's sitting there and realizing, I have a lot of extra life. Ad nauseum, say they're like, this is 5 mana. How many cards can I get out of this? I have a lot of life, so. And then they cast it a couple times and they realize, wow, if I reduce the average mana cost of my cards, I can draw more cards. And then eventually they reach the point where they're winning the game. You know?
Yeah. I don't see this happening specifically from ad nauseum, but I do respect the idea that this can happen with any other win con that we suddenly see, like Tooth and Nail. For a while was like the best win con that Gruul had access to. Gruul, which was almost non-existent in our format, and it was, I don't know, I feel like a lot of us were kind of nervous that casual players would be like, man, look at like Kiki and like I win the game, and the committee would be like, no, you cannot win the game, and then they take the only tool that Gruul had, and it has a few more nowadays, but that's certainly a dynamic that we've seen happen, and it can happen again. But I think that there are lines that just won't be crossed. Like, I don't think if we had given Flash Hulk another 3 years, that casual would have broken it, because there's so many weird things that you have to do that go against a casual player's mindset. At least the casual players that I've played against, which have been many, a lot of them just wouldn't do it.
I don't think they ever would. And the Flash ban was a ban made for cEDH, where they explicitly stated they would never do something like that again. But can they really just do it once? Can they really?
Did they really say they wouldn't?
Yeah, they said that this is their one time, that they wouldn't be, that they would never normally do it.
Right. No, but I think they worded it a little bit more along the lines of, we do not plan to do this again.
Yeah.
But not we're never going to. Like, if.
Yeah, I think they worded it like more softly, that they don't plan on taking that kind of action again.
And I'm low key kind of happy about that. I don't want their fingerprints all over our format too. It's just kind of the byproducts, the effects, the side effects of the casual bans that hit us.
Yeah, and bottom line, as cEDH players, we're going to play with whatever we can, which is just whatever's not on the ban list. No matter,
watch out for those Norn decks now.
No matter if
Worldfire.
No matter if the ban list makes sense to us. But as our obligatory opinion piece, the ban makes no sense. The unban is fine. Like, okay, but
it's cool.
Yeah, I hope the unban sets a precedent for more unbans in the future.
Yeah, me too. I honestly think it came down to, it was more, it just grew more embarrassing to have Worldfire on the ban list than in the format. It's embarrassing in both places, but one finally outweighed the other.
Yeah, and it was the least embarrassing of the options.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think with that we can bring it to a close. as far as updates go, I've made a couple adjustments to my Selvala list. Power Rangers has gotten a little bit of an update. Let me pull it up here. Where is it? Here we go. I'll be doing a full deck tech on all of my decks at some point on this channel, but this deck got a little bit of an update. So I realized, I think I was just playing some jank life gain storm deck I'd brewed up, but Well of Lost Dreams is a 4-mana artifact that says whenever you gain life, you may pay X, where X is less than or equal to the amount of life you've gained. If you do, draw X cards. And Selvala Explorer Return says tab, each player reveals the top card of their library. For each non-land card revealed this way, add 1 green mana and you gain 1 life. Then each player draws a card. So if I have Well of Lost Dreams in play, Selvala makes 1 life for each mana she adds. So I can draw a card for each non-land card that is revealed to Selvala every single turn. So that seemed pretty powerful to me. That really breaks the symmetry of it. Like, if there are 3 non-land cards revealed, everyone draws 1 card, but I draw 4 cards.
Yeah, we do love our card draw.
Yep. And then similar to that is Dawn of Hope. It just triggers once. You can pay 2 and draw a card when you gain life. So I draw 2 cards. Everyone else draws 1 card. With the abundance of silence effects in white, I took a different approach to it. Another thing I want to point out in my new Selvala list is Ecological Appreciation. Heard of that card before?
Ooh, wait a second. Is that the like the green gifts ungiven thing?
Yeah.
Aha, yes I have. I don't remember what it does, but I remember it was similar to gifts ungiven.
Mm-hmm. So it's X, 2, and a green. So 3 mana plus X. Search the library and the graveyard for up to 4 creature cards with different names that each have mana value X or less, and reveal them. An opponent chooses 2 of those cards, shuffle the chosen cards into your library, and put the rest onto the battlefield. Exile Ecological Appreciation. So I realized with the Ashaya Power Rangers combo, there is a pile here that more or less wins the game with Selvala. If I cast it for 6, so X is 3, and I grab Korean Ranger, Scrub Ranger, Ranger Captain of Eos, and Village Bellringer. So both Rangers, Ranger Captain of Eos, and Village Bellringer. No matter what an opponent chooses, I will have access to a Power Ranger, and I will have access to an extra untap on Selvala. So if I have any card that gives me access to Ashaya, I'll win on the spot.
Yeah, look at that.
More or less. It's not 100% certain, but it's about as good as Natural Order as I would say in this deck.
It's about as much as you can hope for.
Yeah.
If your deck has no black.
Mm-hmm.
I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not much to report from my end. I'm playing Anya, Falcon Wrath, Madness, and the deck is sweet. Can't really identify exactly how good it is. It's one of those decks that really flies under the radar, and that's one of its greatest strengths, that people aren't super keen on exactly when you have to disrupt it and how. It has some neat tricks with Necromancy being at instant speed, all good stuff. My baby Edric's getting some new tools in this new set. It has the nice 2-mana rogue unblockable werewolf thing, which I am loving. So I can't wait to try that out when the new set comes.
Suspicious Stowaway.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, well, thanks to everyone for listening to us today. Let us know what you think in the comments. We got a little jumbled there on the ban list discussion, but it's I think it might point to how we take the announcements themselves as confusing. But give us all your feedback, and we will talk to you in a couple weeks for the Raw Talk podcast. So thank you to everybody, and thank you, Prince, for joining me.
Of course, and if anyone has any clue as to why exactly Golos was banned, please hit us up in the comments.
Yeah, I'd be interested to hear all your opinions. And that we're signing off. We'll see you later.
Peace.